Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Podcana. We are back with another deck tech, and of course, it's Ruby Amethyst. Both Moyen and I have been playing a lot of Ruby Sapphire, but Ruby Amethyst has gotten space to come back into the metagame. This is a color combination that both of us are very fond of. We're also fond of the evasive characters. This deck list does have evasives in it as well. Outside of that, it's using the new Amethyst bounce cards that came in Rise of the Floodborn as sort of its core package. While it is a control deck, and you will see a lot of control elements in it, it's much more low to the ground than other control decks, which I guess is sort of on brand for us with our old Ruby Amethyst lists. But overall, seems very well positioned to the metagame. It's better against aggro than our Ruby Sapphire list. It's more low to the ground, can contest board a bit more. And it's in the control mirror against other opposing control decks. It can serve as the aggressive deck in that matchup because it can quest for so much and really threaten the board, especially with things like Minnie Mouse. But of course, the bounce backers, we have the Arthurs, we have the Madam Mims, the Merlins, etc. So Moyen, talk to me about sort of the core strategy of this deck in general.
So basically this deck tries to contest board as early as possible, and also contest board very efficiently with mostly Madam Mim, and with the 2-cost and the 3-cost Madam Mim, which is why having a 1-drop is so important. And then while contesting board early, you can try to get a lot of chip damage in with anything that sticks onto the board, but especially the evasive Minnie Mouse. And then once you get to the later stages of the game, you can outvalue your opponent, because as soon as they flood the board too much, you can reset it with Be Prepared and then go from there. And your deck has a lot of card draw with Maleficent's friends on the other side and the draw Merlins. But also, even if your opponent does have a lot of resources, this deck can threaten a lot of small questers that they need to keep removing. And also it can get a lot of lore in that there's nothing that they can do about it. With a few spellbooks, you can get a few lore points in every turn. And also Merlin is basically 2 lore at least every time. And if you have enough ink, you can also bounce it a few times and get extra lore in that way.
Yeah, and you mentioned it a little bit already, but let's talk about some of the upgrades and new cards that this deck got in Rise of the Floodborn. We already talked about Minnie Mouse style of Surfer, so previously we were playing things like Pongo and Goofy in Ruby Amethyst Evasive. This isn't an all-in evasive list, but Minnie Mouse is just better than both of those cards. In every single way, you want to pay as little ink as possible for your evasive character that quests for 2, and this card is absolutely insane. Ruby Amethyst in general is much better against aggro, right? Because you have access to these Madam Mims. They can come down early and trade very efficiently into things like Simba. So Simba's a 2/3, so your Madam Mim Snake can trade into the Simba and also trade into the 1-cost Lilo, which is a very threatening card. Your Madam Mim Fox can do a similar thing, can just very efficient trades there. And then you also have card draw on bodies as well in form of Merlin Rabbit. So it's drawing, usually 2 cards, which is just absolutely insane. Like Moyen said, you can bounce it as well. We have other, cards, of course, from the previous set, like Maui, which is still an all-star. But in terms of cards from Rise of the Floodborn, we have Yzma, which is, this is a card that we're not sure on 4 copies quite yet. But Yzma is allowing you to get more card draw, maybe remove pesky threats from your opponent. We have 1 Lady Tremaine, again, testing sort of the testing process of this deck is figuring out exactly how many of things like the 1 of Lady Tremaine we're going to keep in the deck, but Lady Tremaine can be very powerful, especially after something like a Be Prepared. And then one of Moyen and I's favorite cards is Scar, Vicious Cheater. Is 4 the correct amount? Not sure, but it's definitely probably 3, maybe 3 or 4. This card is just so powerful. It's so strong. It's so good against aggressive decks, mid-range decks. And when you're playing something like Ruby Amethyst, those are usually the deck lists you're worried about. You're less worried about these opposing control decks. Moyen, one of the most popular decks in the metagame right now, and I know it's so popular, it's probably even a bit of a sore point for people because they face it so much and it's so strong, is Ruby Sapphire. How does this deck do specifically against that deck?
So basically, the game plan we talked about earlier is exactly the game plan that works very well against Ruby Sapphire. It's you get to develop a few very early threats while they spend their turns just ramping up their resources, and then at that point where they're able to reset the board, you're not close to winning the game yet, but you've gotten enough lore points in that it basically means with over time, just with any chipping damage and with spellbooks and Merlins, you can get to 20 before them, and if they ever develop too much of a board, you have the board resets yourself in form of be prepared and scars.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I want to reiterate, which is kind of the core reason you would probably pick this deck over Ruby Sapphire at this point in the game, is that I do believe that this deck list is stronger against the aggressive decks. And that's really where we've seen the metagame shift over the past few weeks is Ruby Sapphire became very, very, very popular, almost like the deck to beat in the metagame. And as a result, you see more people now playing these aggressive deck lists because those deck lists are well positioned into Ruby Sapphire. That being said, I mean, another deck list and something that I've seen on ladder a lot is Steel Amber, the Whole New World, or the Wheel deck as it's referred to. How do you feel that this Ruby Amethyst list performs into that list?
I would say that on the other hand side is the downside to this deck. I think this deck's matchup against Amber Steel is a lot closer than Ruby Sapphire is into Amber Steel. Ruby Sapphire completely destroys the deck, while this deck has a very close matchup into it. And it's I would say it's similar against aggro. It's basically the biggest upside for this deck, I would say, is that it actually beats Ruby Sapphire. So it's also one of the responses people came up with in reaction to Ruby Sapphire emerging.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we're going to keep the deck tech short this time and let the gameplay speak for itself. So without further ado, let's head into that gameplay. All right, so into the first game here, Moyen, what are you thinking about when mulliganing with this deck? This deck does play 20 uninkables.
So we mulligan for ink, but we also are very inclined to mulligan for 1-drops, so that our Madam Mims work, and we mulligan for friends on the other side, plus anything that can sing it. Because we already have a 1, we don't need to mulligan any of the inkables away to look for a 1.
Yeah, and like you said, having that 1-drop for that 2-drop Madam Mim is critical in the case that we do face up against in a more aggressive-oriented deck.
First card we ink is Madam Mim, because we have 2 of them, and the second one very rarely useful, otherwise we would have inked Yzma.
How do you feel this deck is generally positioned in the metagame right now?
It's a little bit of a response to the metagame, because it can chip in lore again in the blue-red matchup, even when they keep removing your board. And even when they have more resources, then you can still get to 20 a decent amount of that time. Plus, it has a decent shot against aggro, so I think this is one of the decks with the least polarizing matchups, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because right now I feel like the talk of the town, or at least it was in the past weeks, is that Ruby Sapphire list, but of course it is a bit susceptible to aggro, which has started to pick up in popularity as well. Looks like we are against a Steel Amber deck here.
Yeah, so aggro and even this decks are both rising in popularity because, or have already risen in popularity due to the rise of Ruby Sapphire. So it's playing the normal early game, any 1-drop into Mim, to any 3-drop basically.
Yeah, and are we expecting to get a Whole New World in here as well on turn 3 or turn 4 of our opponent's turn? And does it change our strategy at all if we do?
On this turn, of course not. We only had 1 play. Yeah, we only had 1 play. But even if we had friends on the other side, that's not really a reasonable line. But going into a turn where you can get a Whole New World, you're not inclined to use friends on the other side, basically, to draw cards, because it could be nullified immediately. So you're inclined to play for board more than for cards in hand. Yeah, as soon as the queen is on the board, basically they could have it every turn, which might look like they have it. Okay. They might still have it. This was still a very, very strong turn. So for example, we wouldn't value drawing cards ever here when it is a possible play for them to play Whole New World.
Yeah, you'll see your opposing players on this Amber Steel list. They will look to sort of dump as much as their hand as possible before casting a Whole New World. The disparity in their hand versus your hand when they cast that card is what makes it so powerful.
Yeah, so basically the way you play against it is you want to try to hold enough value that if they don't play it, you can still compete with their value. But you still have to try to play for as much tempo as possible. So that you don't fall too far behind if they play a Whole New World. Doesn't seem like they have. So, for example, here, Friends on the Other Side is the worst card if we get wheeled after turn 5. But I think it might be a necessary card to have if we don't get wheeled. Well, not necessary, but I think it can help a lot if we don't get wheeled. So I think I'm inclined to ink Merlin here. Also a nice feature about getting the queen off the board is that they can no longer just world's greatest criminal mind everything that you play.
Yep. We see the power of that new song with the sword range on. Drawing your card as well.
It's very good with Cinderella, but I think it's just good in general. If anything can sing it, you're very happy, even if it's a 3-drop. Plus, I think even the hard casting it is totally fine for 3 ink.
Yeah, so it looks like we're in we're definitely in a behind at this point, but we have tons of draws in order to maintain board parity on this board, and then just start our draw engine. We also have the Sorcerer Spellbook, which is going to give us sort of incremental lore per turn. So it feels like we're in a fine position at this point.
I think we're in a good position. So this is a good example of we held just enough value so that if we don't get wheeled, we can compete with it. But until we have to, we would rather play for board first and then we draw the cards.
Yeah, and the way that we keep saying wheel, but we're talking about a Whole New World. It's kind of the way that card has been referred to so far. But the way that card tends to work is the later you go in the game, especially if you're on something like a more mid-range or control deck, the less powerful it is for your opponent because your card quality is in general better than your opponent's. There is a bit of a discussion there if they can dump their hand, in a single turn, or dump it faster than you and still get tons of card advantage off of a Whole New World. But in general, that card is more powerful early game for your opposing Amber Steel player than it is late.
Also, this turn we decide not to quest with Lady Tremaine because it would just... I think we have the time to play it this slow, and this means it doesn't die to one trade plus another Let the Storm Rage on, or even the double trade. So we get some extra value out of that.
And it looks like our opponent didn't have a Whole New World, so it's a pretty reasonable concede there, because they were basically just going to lose to the value that was on board, and their deck is not designed to play from that far behind.
Yep.
All right, going into game 2 here. Again, same strategy when mulliganing. Are we looking for getting rid of those uninkables potentially and looking for those early 1-drops in order to turn on our Madam Mims?
So Maleficent is definitely one thing we're looking for. Minnie Mouse can be very good. Even Merlin is actually very decent if we have enough ink to get there. It's just with the prevalence of aggro, I'm not sure I can afford to keep it. So I think I'm mulliganing like this.
Do you make any mulligan decisions based off going first or second here?
Not with this deck. I don't think I necessarily do.
By the way, this is this is the same opponent from the previous game, so this person looks to be on Amber Steel.
Yes, Amber Steel with Lilo.
Kind of makes our evase. I wonder if our evasive is less good now. I guess it does have the 3-butt, so let the Storm Rage on. It does do 2 damage. But, traditionally these evasives that are in the deck, they're in the deck to really punish other control decks. Like things like Blue Sapphire that can't remove it efficiently, where these steel decks can sort of remove it efficiently. I mean, the 3-butt does make it a bit more challenging. They don't really play as much Smash anymore. But I think that they removed a lot of the Tinkerbells, or do they still play the four Tinkerbells, the one that pings?
They definitely play that one, and then it varies how many 3-cost Tinkerbells they play to actually shift it onto.
Yeah, so we'll see if our opponent has a better curve this time if they do find a whole new world. I mean, surely they're definitely mulliganing for it.
Okay, I'm not sure if you're supposed to exert it. Maybe it's what I would want to kill the most. Oh, okay. Just don't have board. That's actually very strong because it means we can't Madam Mim into the Simba. Which was by far our best play before that.
Yep, definitely hurts us. But
it probably means these 3 get to quest 2 more times before anything happens. We want to draw a 1-drop. I think I go Maleficent here.
Yeah, I think so.
And I don't think I will need the Minnie Mouse this game, so we just ink 3 evasive Minnie Mouse. In this matchup, we're definitely the control deck, which we aren't in all matchups, but in this one we are for sure. So just care about surviving a lot more than about threatening ourselves. Especially with the spot state. So the reason why we really wanted the 1-drop was that I could go just ink, then play a 1-drop, then play Madam Mim, and then Maleficent gets a value trade and Madam Mim gets a value trade. While if I have to bounce Maleficent, then I don't get that value trade at all. So now I have to decide, do I want to start trading as early as possible, so this turn? Or am I fine fitting in the Merlin here?
It's interesting. I feel like I would have erred on the side of the Madam Mim, because I feel like these Mauis are actually going to kind of take over the game if we don't get wheeled. Because it's just a pretty strong card versus this Amber Steel deck.
Yes. And they could have the wheel. And it's honestly kind of likely they have the wheel because they passed on 4. So I think I'm okay with getting this down now, because Merlin is very fine if we get to play Maui next turn, but it's a lot worse if we don't. So I think I'm fine with playing Mim. Yeah, it's for sure the better play. I think even 3 Maui. Even the 3rd Maui is better than the Maleficent.
Maui is so good against Amber Steel in general. I mean, it can get criminal minded now, but it's such a good card. It just takes over a board.
I also started seeing more Grand Dukes. At least they weren't able to sing this, so they spent their turn doing this. So.
Absolutely. It's so much better for us when they don't sing it.
And I'm really hoping they don't trade. And we can sing Fence on the other side with the Madam Mim. Yeah.
Oh, they don't trade? Maybe saving it for like Strength of a Raging Fire or something? Or maybe a shift? That's interesting.
Or it's also very possible that they were just like, that they were thinking, oh, I'm Tinkerbelling next turn anyway, so I don't want to waste.
Good point.
Resources. So we have a couple options. Yzma is one of the cards that plays for tempo lots. Just in general, not this turn, but that can be good to play around wheel. If you remove your opponent's cards with it. I think I'm most likely just bouncing the Madam Mim back to hand, so like recovering 2 HP. Or we could just drop a Merlin. And then they actually get their Tinkerbell off. And probably kill a Pascal, which we would just throw down.
Yeah, I kind of like the Madam Mim play just because it does look like they telegraphed Tinkerbell potentially, but also it's just, I mean...
But even against Tinkerbell, is it that much better? I'm not sure it is. Because we also just develop a 3 HP body instead of this 3 HP body that could get us closer to better turns. I think I'm preferring the Madam, the Merlin. And so we could just throw down another Pascal just in case they don't do it, but I think we'll keep it. Keeping it only matters a few, doesn't matter that often as either, because we might not have time to use it before the second wheel comes down.
So definitely starting to look like some sort of AoE.
Yep.
And there she is.
Had a read on that. I don't mind just playing Yzma on it, slowing them down a little bit. I think. Yeah. And then we're going into board wipe territory where 4 Scars and 4 Be Prepared come online. Which they could wheel away, but they don't know that we have them, and they have a lot of cards, so maybe they don't even want to wheel.
Yeah, actually, it's funny how this sort of disincentivizes them to wheel.
Yep.
Disincentivizes them to dump on board. It's just the truth of this matchup that they're probably going to find another wheel because they drew an initial 7 cards. They've now drawn for the turn. We also drew them 2 more cards, but again, being the control deck, the later the game goes, the more ink we have, the less impactful wheel is against us because our card quality is just better in general.
Plus, the aerial can find it. They did so when they did play the first wheel, their hand was double wheel because they only had 2 cards in hand at that time. Just noteworthy. There's only 2 more wheels in the deck. The aerial grabbed your sword, right?
Yes. And how do you feel this Amber Steel deck is positioned in the metagame right now? Because it's very, very powerful against aggro, right? Which has risen in popularity in response to Sapphire Ruby. But in general, this deck, I mean, it's hard to say this deck list has a tough time against aggro, because I think that the old versions of it, the mid-range version of this deck, had a tough time against aggro, but this actually, or against control, but this deck actually can be decently powerful against control because it can run so far ahead with the game.
Yes, so wait, let's figure out this turn first, and I can go with my answer. We could develop some arters. Could dig a little further. So there's no reason to board wipe yet. This is definitely questing. And we could just throw a Pascal onto the board if we expect. But I don't know, I think they're still inclined to keep AoEing the board.
And we know they have the grab your swords, like you said.
Yeah. Could even sing Friends on the other side if there's anything particular we're looking for. Book would be really nice to have here. Just to develop before we board clear, and then we can keep gaining the incremental lore. I think I value the 2 quests more than that. That's also not bad at all. I think I'm fine just playing this.
Alright, on to the question. How do you feel that Amber Steel is positioned in the metagame right now?
I think it's the best deck against aggro. And it is decently positioned in the meta. Just loses to Ruby Amethyst by a lot. Not Ruby Amethyst. Ruby Sapphire, blue-red. So I think that one next meta evolution that's coming our way is finding the steel deck that doesn't need to beat aggro as much as Amber Steel does, but maybe that's better positioned in those other matchups. And yeah, I have a feeling it could be Steel Amethyst, but I think that deck is very far away from refinement, and that will be a fun journey to figure out that puzzle.
Yeah, it's interesting in the context of Rise of Floodborn because Steel got more card draw, and that's a lot. Like Steel was really lacking that card draw, so Steel had to sort of be paired with Amethyst in the control aspect. But maybe you could pair Steel without Amethyst nowadays too. I think some Steel-based control deck is the way to go though. Like, is the truth in terms of.
Because Steel is the only way you actually can combat aggro. It kind of has a monopoly on that. This turn we could play very quickly because there was no other good place. This was very clean, clear 2 things, develop a small threat. Second area.
They missed off the Ariel, right?
Yeah, they didn't get anything. I think they whiffed. So Scar's still a very good card. Just we don't have the upside of healing it like in Sapphire. So I want to keep destroying them on board without playing into AoE too much. So there's a few different lines. We could bounce the Scar, so we have another Scar in hand with Madam Mim, trade Madam Mim and Maui, but which would leave both of them on 1 HP. We could just play Maui and a Merlin, which is I think what I'm leaning towards, and then we trade Maui into the Simba. Then we have a 3 HP Maui, and we just trade Scar into the Queen.
And you have the card draw off the Merlin too, in case they do AoE.
And if we get weird, that's still... I mean, it's the best play, but it's still alright. So I guess this matchup I would say is one of the downsides if you would straight up compare this deck to Sapphire Ruby. I think Sapphire Ruby is better against that deck, but this deck could be better against Sapphire Ruby and maybe it's a little bit better against aggro.
Yeah, and Stitch Rockstar here coming down is sort of the other key engine card for this deck. It does have access to the whole new world, but also the Stitch Rockstar can threaten to draw a lot of cards.
So we could board wipe now. There's already 4 quests on the board, but they're not that far ahead because we have Maui and Merlin. If we were to board wipe, we could develop an Arthur behind it. Alternatively, we could bounce one of the Merlins back to hand and develop an Arthur behind. Also fine.
Yeah. I was leaning towards board wipe because I feel like the only way back into this game is drawing off Stitch or playing the whole new world. It's not unlikely to the whole new world in hand, but if they do have two non-draw cards in hand, I mean, they just lose on the spot. So
I think the biggest upside to playing Be Prepared here is that even if they have a whole new world, they can no longer sing it most likely.
True. Yeah, and like.
Inking Fence on the other side was also an option to keep another bounce on Merlin, but we're not that close to 20 that I think we want to be doing that yet. Okay, that's expensive.
Yeah, I think this is the key inflection point of the matchup where we kind of run away with the game.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, how do we give them the least chance to get back into this game? Because I'm not sure it's Yzma-ing that Tinker. It could be, honestly.
I don't think so. I think that the reason they're losing so much is because they lack card draw right now. If they have the wheel. And the last thing we want to do is draw them into more card draw potentially. Also, we have friends on the other side as well to sing on our end, so we can
But
and keep
okay,
drawing cards.
all of this makes sense, but I think Yzma might still be the best play because basically I'm not sure any of the cards they get actually matter if
True.
in turn they don't have Tinkerbell on the board and we have either Arthur Yzma or Arthur Merlin on the board.
I guess if they wheel us, they'll wheel us into another Be Prepared most likely as well. And the Scar.
Yeah, so basically it makes it more likely that they do have the wheel, but it makes it less impactful if they have it in comparison to if we left up the Tinkerbell. If then they top deck the wheel and they can sing it, maybe they have a chance. So Arthur could be 3 lower. It's a little bit less than that for sure. I don't think we are inking any of these. Because I think if we don't get wheeled, it's kind of important to still have access to these. Double Tinkerbell. I don't mind that at all. Can either bounce Yzma to clear something, or just bounce Merlin for law. So we have 5 law on the board, so we are on 11. With 3 Merlins, that's kinda 17. With 1 bounce, that's kinda 19. Unstoppable law. So we're kinda close. But we are losing board if Tinkerbell can just easily get these trades. But I think we can waste them. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we can waste them. I think we draw 2. And then we ink anything. And play 2 Merlins and bounce one of them. We could as well bounce Yzma, because if we bounce Yzma, they only have 1 trade on the board, which is into Arthur, so they can only deal 2 once. And then these just quest. Yeah, I think we're bouncing Yzma. And at this point, I think it's kind of GG. They need to kind of threaten 20 law this turn already, which is hard to do unless they top deck exactly wheel. And then we also get new tools. And if they don't, they have to trade once, most likely. And then that means they're questing for a maximum of 2. And we have 2 quests coming in by Merlin. And then Merlin, Snake, Merlin. Which over 2 turns gets there. So this is a big strength of the deck, is that even when you lose control of the board, it has ways to keep chipping in with lore, either with Merlins or with Spellbook. So it's like this stuff that keeps... You can keep following your game plan, and it's very hard or even impossible to interact with for your opponent. It's just the game plan is a little slow. So their best way to interact with it is to raise you. But if they can't do that, then you're basically golden.
Yeah, which is one of these interesting changes from... yeah, now we see the deck doing its thing. One of these interesting changes from Rise of the Floodborn is now you're able to acquire a lot of these quest points, not traditionally through just questing. And that's kind of one of the things this deck does. And you can see the power now, all the way up to 19.
So even without the Merlin in hand, they would never be able to stop this Merlin from questing.
Yeah, and that was a much closer game as well for our opponent, because they found their key cards, and we were able to kind of showcase how our deck adapted to actually getting wheeled as well.
Yeah, this was more of a display of how games can go on average. Okay. So I think let's have to go. I would keep Merlin if I had a 1, but I don't, so I kind of need to mulligan for that. And then the 2 cost and 3 cost Mim are great if we do find a 1 drop.
Yep, and we do in the form of Pascal and Minnie Mouse here. So it looks like we've got a good anti-aggro hand if we do end up facing one of those decks. We have a lot of
So
board
we don't have
here.
like these crazy steal tools, but we at least have a very fair contester board via board hand.
Wow, we are facing Sapphire Steel, it looks like. That's interesting. This is not a color combination that I have faced yet in Rise of the Floodborn.
I think I've probably faced all of them.
Yeah, people are definitely brewing. I faced mostly, honestly, my latter experience is mostly Popsicle Mirrors and aggro decks.
Or technically, I probably was supposed to just play Minnie Mouse here, just in case they would somehow ping it with a steel card. But it's alright, I don't think it matters all that often. And if they were to remove it, it's not the end of the world. But yeah, that's much better. Okay. So for a slow game, you could even like play Arthur on 3 and then Merlin on 4 and even bounce the Merlin. But it's a very slow game plan.
Let's talk about the macro game plan against another control or mid-range deck. How does our deck stand out? Is it via the Sorceress Spellbook and things like Arthur getting access to so much questing lore? Like, are we now the aggressive deck most of the time in those matchups?
Basically, in every slow matchup, you are suddenly... at least you want to be the aggressive deck. And if you can be the aggressive deck, you're very happy about that, because at a certain point, no matter how much control you have some sort of inevitability with spellbooks and bouncing Merlins, so that the chip damage early becomes all that much more impactful, which is also the reason why we're not playing all that top end that you could play in a normal control Ruby Amethyst deck. Because we don't think basically, I don't think it's necessary. I think you can win these control decks by going under them until you just have a few board wipes and some sort of lore gain with Merlin and Spellbooks.
So what's interesting is that this color combination specifically has access to ramp and a whole new world, so we could be getting wheeled as well.
Yeah, so we really want to be playing around the wheel, for sure. This color combination was a little bit more popular in set 1.
Yep, this was what was usually referred to as the sort of Bell combo deck, but yeah, I mean, what this deck was really lacking before, or at least like these colors were lacking, was I guess value. Like it couldn't value trade well into the control decks. I think it also had trouble against some aggro decks, and then if it didn't find wheel, it was really really out of luck.
So it was both slow against aggro plus running out of value against control, because it didn't have all that card draw and value generation that it now has. So I decided not to quest with Arthur, just to play around a whole new world a little bit more. So I think having these 3/3s and 4/3s is what ensures we are in a fine spot against a whole new world.
Yeah.
This turn I think it's different. This turn I think we can totally go for it. But at the same time we don't have to. They can't really clear our board. And it's 3 HP. I think we might wait one more turn. Like against a no wheel deck we could even do stuff like Arthur bounce something and then Madam Mim to bounce the Arthur, and then later get another 3 quest Arthur bounce in. But I think I'm just playing Maui and questing with the big bots that they can trade into that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then next turn would be the turn I pull the trigger on Arthur. Which even helps if we draw another Uninkable, to just bounce something, ink it, and then play Lady Tremaine, for example. Judy Hobbs is one way they can answer the Spellbook inevitability, but I don't think it's the most backbreaking way.
So our opponent has 0 cards in hand at this point.
But this number is very big.
That's why I'm wondering if we're just gonna... Yeah, I mean, we trying to just get to be prepared here.
Caterpillar is kind of crazy.
It is a crazy card. It really is. This card is definitely slept on. I mean, a 3, the quest for 3, it's
like,
crazy.
It's like an Arthur, but doesn't need. I mean, bouncing can be good, but it doesn't need to bounce anything, and it's inkable. I think Scott's very strong. They're at plus 14 without ever having quested. Imagine if they had gotten any chip damage in by going first or something.
Do we just play the, I mean, yeah, it's like, what are we bouncing back off the Arthur? But I was wondering if we're playing the Merlin and we're just inking to get the 7 ink, and we play the Merlin so we can draw additional cards and, like, just get value over our opponent while we plan to clear their board.
I think we Lady Tremaine. It kills at least a 2 lore character. Or we could also just wait until we be prepared, but I don't know if we have to. We might just be able to raise them first.
Okay, yeah, we can raise them.
Interesting spot for sure. But with having the be prepared, we can. I mean, this turn for sure we quest with the Arthur. Basically, because we don't care about them trading, because if they trade before we can wipe the entire board, then we're totally fine with that. I could even just set up the Arthur again. Sure, let's just play for value. And then wipe the board. And then also keep these 2 up so they're inclined to trade into them. Okay.
That's good.
On 0 cards.
Okay.
At least they didn't go Flaversham, ink something, and then real. So they know that Be Prepared can be coming, so they do get at least their lore in once, which is already a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's crazy the just how much more explosive some of these decks got in Rise of the Floodborn.
Yeah, this would not be possible in set 1. Set 1 you would be able to see all the lore that's coming, and it would be coming a lot slower than this.
Yeah, plus 14 into plus 15. As they only quested on 2 turns. And quest for 30.
How much do we have here? 16, 17, 18, 19. Unlucky.
19 with the spellbook, right?
No, we would have 17 on board, and then Merlin enters play and leaves play once. So that would be the plus 2, 19. And then if we could activate this, we would have 20, but we're missing 1 door.
Oh, I was wondering if we... Yeah. Okay, yeah.
I wish we would have drawn an Inkable, so we could keep the Merlin for the +1 quest. So we could just go like Spellbook, get a lore, and the next turn Merlin Spellbook, get a lore, for example. Okay. They can only go to 18, and I don't see them getting 2 extra lore out of nothing. So the only downside to playing Spellbook is if they had the 3rd Judy Hops. And Lady Tremaine would mean can only go up to 16, and then they have to remove it to survive. If they Judy Hops us, they go to 18, and then we just kind of lose.
Yeah.
Unless we find any Madam Mim to bounce it, then we still win. Interesting spot. I think I'm okay just playing it slow here with Lady Tremaine, just because they have the Judy Hops out. Are you fine with this? Do you like the play?
I approve, Moyen. I approve. Okay. What is this card? I've never...
It's a 1/3 bodyguard with resist. I think this can be very good in like more aggressive gray decks.
Mm.
It's a pretty good card. Bang!
There we go. I mean, it's a cool showcase from our opponent. That was a cool deck, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. I think there could be some blue deck that plays caterpillars that's like very aggressive, maybe even
blue-green or something.
Or blue amethyst, and then you go in early, and then you have the spellbooks. Right?
Yeah, I remember blue-green just absolutely destroying, or just being so good against control in the last bit of game. It just lost everything else, but the caterpillar would have been such a good addition to that deck. It's just so crazy. But who knows? Rise of the Floodborn changes the context on a lot of these matchups. Anyway, I mean, how do you feel about this deck list right now? I mean, I know we kind of just talked about any cards. What cards do you think about sort of subbing in or subbing out? I know we were kind of testing the Yzmas here. We cut down on a Spellbook. Any other cards that are sort of coming to mind, or cards that are sort of underperformed in this list?
I'm pretty happy with the list. It's basically the numbers could be tweaked around. It's how many Lady Tremaines and Scars do we want? Do we want 3 or 4 Sorcerer Spellbook? That's the thoughts about the cards that are already in the deck. And then for the cards that are not in the deck, there's LeFou that can be very strong if you get to hit it on Arthur, so you don't even need to bounce it to protect the Arthur, so that can be very efficient. If you want to go even more aggressive, and then if you want to go slower, you could play top end like Arthur, you could play top end like Elsa and Ursula and Maleficent. But I'm very happy with this more aggressive take on the deck, where you're not always trying to control the game. It's more of a hybrid build where you have a lot of different game plans you can go for depending on the matchup.
Yeah, and that's one of the key points where our list is divergent from some of the other lists that are out there. I've seen Ruby Amethyst lists that are playing the similar bounce package, but instead are playing top end in the form of Elsa, Maleficent, potentially something like Ursula. I think it's kind of par for the course with me and you that we tend to sort of kind of try to cut some of those more top end control cards and play things like the evasives, because in the control mirror, those cards are so insanely powerful. And we played things like Pongo and Goofy in the previous meta. This card is better than both of those cards a lot. This card is actually insane and gives us so much. It just threatens so much lore against opposing control deck and in the control matchup that you don't really need to be playing some of these. Like top end cards like Maleficent feel so weak when your opponent is questing for 2 every turn or something like a Minnie Mouse, because you just can't trade into that. It's just not as efficient for you. And we just got like the evasive package got so many more tools in Rise of the Floodborn. The downside though is that the Amber Steel deck, the wheel deck, got more board removal, more card draw. It's just a better deck now, right? And that is inherently decent against evasives, as well as in terms of cards that exist in Lorcana that you can play in your deck. There is so much more evasive hate that exists in the game. So if evasives did become popular and did become a top sort of meta deck, most colors in the game can now tech against it if they want to.
Yeah, so the evasive isn't good in all matchups, but there's no matchup where it's like truly terrible, and in some matchups it completely makes the difference of being able to chip so much lore in that you can so you don't win the game before you can get Elsa or Maleficent. It's just you get the game to a spot where if they were to come down, it wouldn't even be beneficial for your opponent, and you can still get to 20 lore before them.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, Moyen, I appreciate you sharing this deck list with us. Both you and I are definitely fond of Ruby Amethyst, so it's great to see it come back into the mega game. We appreciate everybody watching this video. Shoot us a comment below on what deck list or what color combination you would like to see us cover next. I think we're probably a bit known for covering the control deck list and the control archetype, so maybe we could do an aggro or mid-range deck list if y'all are interested in that. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching the video, and we'll see you next time.